If you're President Trump right now, you're trying to convince everybody on Wall Street, as well as everybody who's willing to listen to you anymore, that this is a mini war. No, this is not a big war. This is a small war. In other words, don't worry about it. We've got it under control. We'll manage it. There's nothing really that the Iranians can do anymore. This will end when we decide to end it. In the meantime, by all means, continue to trade your stocks and bonds. Don't be concerned about this. This is not a major event. Well, Dan, that's nonsense, as you and I both know. What Iran has proven is that they can be very effective, and they don't really need a Navy per se or an Air Force. They've got the ability with terrestrial-based and space-based intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to see persistently everything that happens in the Gulf region and around their country. And they can target instantaneously with data that comes from satellites right down to the weapon system. And that is deciding the outcome. And the place is too big to invade. We don't have a million men standing around waiting to be shipped out to go somewhere and do anything. So the whole business is a fraud. And what he's trying to do is convince everybody it's not. None of this is going to work. And again, you can't print the diesel that moves your trucks. You can't print the fertilizer that grows your crops. You can't print the natural gas that powers your factories. So America had better wake up. We better find a way around this or out of it, because our business strategies cannot easily account for physical scarcity of food, feed, fuel, and fertilizer caused by these shipping closures. This is a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe on a global level. It hasn't hit us dramatically yet, but you and I know over the next 60 days, it's going to be hell to pay here inside the United States. And that's shut down the food stamps. See what the hell happens. All hell will break loose in this country.
Indeed. In fact,
we don't call them food stamps anymore. What do we call them now? We gave them a new name. I don't remember.
Yeah, same concept. Yeah, I can't think of it. But that's what we had. Chris Martinson was on our show a couple of days ago from Peak Prosperity, and he was complaining that when Trump does these kinds of things, and when he reassures the markets and causes the price to go down, especially of oil, he considers that a really bad thing, because that gives false signals to the American public that everything's going to be fine. Don't cut back anything. Don't conserve anything. Just keep on spending like you have been. Keep on driving like you have been. But then we're chewing down our strategic petroleum reserve. The only way we can keep doing this is by getting rid of our stored up fuel. But then the problem is going to come in, as you just talked about, that once you run out of that excess and the strait is still closed, now then you don't have any more of that. So now then there's a physical shortfall. And then that's when the price, he predicts, is just going to shoot north.
Well, Americans aren't aware of it, but 70% of our farmers have already said they can't even afford to buy fertilizer anymore. That's how high the price of fertilizer has risen. Now, the president was warned about this, believe it or not, back in March. And what happened? He ignored it. President Trump has a habit of ignoring things that don't conform to his expectation. And I think that's what he's trying to do right now. He's trying to make everyone feel good, and he's going to continue to do this until he can't. And it's not going to last very long.
Now, let's take a look at what the other side of this equation is thinking, because that can give us a clue to where we're heading. And this is from Ghalibaf on his X account. Really important, I think, here. He said the new equation, the Strait of Hormuz, is in the process of being solidified. So they have no intent, and every person that I've either read or talked to on the Iranian side says that it's not even up for negotiation or debate. They will retain control of the strait, which he seems to imply here. The security of shipping and energy transit has been jeopardized by the United States and its allies, so he's certainly blaming us for, of course, we started the war through the violation of the ceasefire and the imposition of a blockade. Of course, their evil will diminish. Then he says the important thing here, we know full well that the continuation of the status quo is intolerable for America while we have not yet even begun. And I think what he's saying there, which is something Professor Morandi has said and several others, that they can, the Iranian side can suffer a lot more than we can and a lot longer than we can, because they don't have the issue of fertilizers and all the stuff being shut off like we do. Most of the stuff, he said, they have like 90% domestic food and everything else that they have right there in their country. So they can endure the currency being devalued, the loss of imports. They suffer because of medicines not getting in and other kinds of things. But they think they can suffer longer than we can. Is he right or is he wrong?
No, I think he's right, but there's something else that nobody bothers to bring up, Dan. When has President Trump gone to the American people and articulated in detail what's at stake for us in this war? When has he talked to the American people and said, we are going to war on behalf of Israel? We're doing it for the following strategic reasons that are valid, that make a difference to our lives. And we are attacking to destroy Iran because Iran's destruction will strategically benefit the United States in some way. He's never made the case because there is no case to be made for those things. Those things are ridiculous. You know, when FDR did many things, and I didn't agree with it. I wasn't there, but I wouldn't have agreed with much of what he did. But on the other hand, he was very good at going to the American people and making the case. Even Lyndon Johnson made a stab at it. He wasn't very good at it, but he made a stab at it. Certainly President Nixon found it necessary, and he did it, and that's one of the reasons he was reelected in a landslide. What's this president doing? He's not doing his job as president, leading this country. That's the biggest issue right now. You know, making ridiculous statements in the Oval Office about reducing the people that you don't like to ruins or rubble. Those kinds of wild statements may, appeal to a few people in your base who like filthy language or, boasts and bloviation, but it doesn't do you any good. And again, where is the strategy? What is the strategic framework? How does this fit in with the larger strategic interests of the United States and its friends? And our friends, by the way, in Asia are the people who are being hurt badly by all of this. I predict that before this is over, the Koreans and the Japanese will be inviting us to pack our things and get out of their countries, just as the Germans now are effectively saying the same thing.
Yeah, and then of course Trump is talking about getting out of the 5,000 or so out of Germany, maybe out of Spain, and I think Italy too. He's just tossing these things around. I doubt he gives any thought to any of this stuff, but I'm pretty sure it's been landing on open ears on the other side, and maybe moving them down the path of asking us to do so.
Well, you and I know from experience that leaving Europe, frankly, is long overdue. We should have gotten out of these places a long time ago. Our presence there has been somewhere between a crutch for many of these countries and their economies, and frankly, a burden. You know, how much of each it is depends on where you are. But the point is, it's unnatural. It doesn't have to happen anymore. There's no strategic justification for it. But if you're going to do this, instead of making nasty statements and justifying your actions on the basis of an insult, why not come up with a plan? And why not sit down with all of these allies and say, look, it's time for us to go. You know that, we know that. So let's see, how do we do this? How long will this last? Can we do this in 24 months, 36 months, 96 months? Let's sit down and figure it out. That hasn't happened. That's because there is no strategic framework.
Yeah.
And everybody keeps saying, what do you think the president's doing? And then you have these poor, pathetic souls sitting on the sidelines like, it's part of a plan. It's a plan. We're harming China. China is the big loser here. Really? I don't think so. I think a lot of people are losing, but China's not one of them, and certainly not Russia. Russia's, profiting from a cash bonanza. The only thing in Russia that the Russians want to know is why the hell Putin isn't ending this war once and for all. They're all sick of it. They want him to crash all the way to the Dnieper River, cross it, take Odessa, seize Kharkiv, march on Kiev, and get it over with. He really ought to. It makes sense for him to do that. He's not going to have a partner in the United States. We're not going to help. The Europeans are sick of it. Their governments are teetering on the edge of disaster. They're going to fall. So Russia should take advantage of this. But they're not thus far. They're sitting around waiting to see what happens next. Big mistake. And these little incremental moves of 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers, Come on, that's not how you win a war. You may win a battle that way, but you're not going to win the war. So it's really strange right now, but the notion that somehow or another we're coming out of this smelling like a rose must mean that no one has a sense of smell, because the whole thing stinks to me.
Yeah, it's a very different smell.
What we're shoveling,
Right. Yeah. I think that's what the being confusion is. Now, so all the stuff that we've talked about so far has been over the Strait of Hormuz. And by the way, this is an interesting map here. This shows in the green on the bottom. This is what General Kane talked about. This is the path that he wants. We want to protect people moving through. The one in the red is kind of in the center. That used to be the path, but it's apparently mined right now. So nobody's using that one. And then in the blue one in the up, that's the approved path for the Iranian side. So you have dueling blockades. You also have dueling safe zones for people to get out. But right now, nobody's getting out on anything. So that just shows you some of the weirdness of it and some of the nonsense. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, though, all this is about the Strait and whether we get the blockades unblocked. But what if we don't? What if we get back to more conflict? One of the things that was asked of at the press conference this morning was, has the ceasefire ended because of these attacks? And General Kane said, well, we've been attacked 10 times, our ships, but it's been kind of low level. None of them have succeeded. So stays below the threshold. That's a political decision anyway. So no, the ceasefire is still in effect. But when you look at some others, folks, and let's go back to Ghalibaf. This is from an Iranian account. This is through Dropsite, where they have said, hey, this is what Ghalibaf is saying. He says the necessity for keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed and preventing U.S. destroyers from passing through it has made conflict between Iran and the United States inevitable. The main confrontation will be carried out with the Israeli regime. And that's interesting because you've had, let's see, I think I got this one still handy here. You've had General Keith Kellogg, who kind of says the same thing. And he's like, look, we should arm the Iranian people to rise up, but we should take Karg Island. We should just quit dithering around. He's been saying this for a long time now. Do you think that the war is inevitable, or do you think that we're going to end up getting off without having to go back to the war?
Well, I mean, that's where we really started the conversation. But I think the speaker in Iran hit on something very, very important that we're not paying enough attention to. What is the rationale for this conflict? It's ultimately Israel. The Israelis want Iran to be destroyed. Again, they view Iran as the last man standing, although they are now increasingly sensitive to the power and the influence of the Turks. And I think their other eye is also in Egypt, because with Turkish support, the Egyptians could pose a real threat. So I think we're losing sight of what this is all about. It all started with Gaza. Remember the 7 October attack, which is largely being discredited now. It's widely understood, even in Israel, this was allowed to happen, right?
That's certainly what a lot of the evidence says, yeah.
So the problem we have now is we allowed it to happen. The Israelis struck back, and then they essentially demonstrated this was their trigger for a plan they already had on the shelf. This is the plan called Project Greater Israel. So Project Freedom has nothing to do with the Strait. It's all about the Project for Greater Israel. Well, that's falling apart in a number of different ways. We can talk about that on another occasion, but I think Ambassador Freeman was on recently and talked in greater detail about how that's collapsing. It hasn't worked in Lebanon. It's not going to work in Jordan. It's not going to work in Syria. And in the meantime, the countries, the two big players, Egypt and Turkey, are acutely aware of what the Israelis are about. And they're on the edge right now of intervention. That's what people don't understand. The entire world is aligning against Israel. And because we are unconditionally supporting them, the world is largely aligning against us. And this is going to get worse unless by some miracle, President Trump realizes all of the dangers that we talked about during this session economically and where we're headed. And if he understands that, he'd end this immediately and get out. And I'm not sure he really understands it, not based on those remarks that you just rebroadcast on your program.
Yeah, and that's supposed to be puzzling because that's supposed to be his one area of actual expertise about the economics and the business aspects, and yet somehow that seems to be missing. But then we're still left with what next? And actually, let me zero in on this Israeli situation, because we've I think in the last show we talked about, when we were talking about the first effects of the first 40 days of this war when it was active, and there was allegedly somewhere around 14,000 targets that we had serviced, et cetera. And that had brought us really low on interceptors, whether it's STAD or PAC-3, on our offensive, whether it was JASM or the Tomahawk cruise missiles. And if we go back into another active phase of fighting, I mean, we're going to dwindle down into into the red or black in terms of the stockpiles. We just can't keep going on. Israel is embarked on a path, especially now in Lebanon, just adding to the rest of them. There's no easy path to military success here, and they can't even maintain that unless we keep shoveling out more cash and more bombs and munitions to allow them to keep going on that. Do you think we'll be able to continue giving Israel that so that they can even try to do these things?
Well, what you're saying is which happens first? Do we collapse financially here at home first? Or do we essentially recognize the futility of our military operations overseas first? I don't have an answer to that. I have this terrible sinking feeling it's going to happen simultaneously. We're going to have an example of this coming up shortly. We're going to wake up. I don't know if it'll be in June or July or maybe earlier. We're going to wake up and discover that the stock market has lost 40, 50, 60% of its value. And anybody you want to pick will talk about this, whether it's Luke Groman or Ray Dalio, any number of people that have looked at this carefully, and they know it's coming. So that could happen anytime. And at the same time, you're right. Most of these exotic munitions, these precision-guided weapons and missiles, they're going to be exhausted in the space of anywhere from 5 days to 10 days, unless you start ratcheting back or reducing your operational tempo. So you want a clear answer which is going to happen first? I don't know, but they're both going to happen, I think, because I still don't see how President Trump does not escalate at this point, because the alternative for him is humiliation.
Well, that's kind of the last question I wanted to ask here, because if last week you said Trump was just going to wait and figure it out mode, and then he figured out, okay, well, we'll do this blockade, and now we'll do this Project Freedom. Well, that's clearly no more than that's paper deep, because it hasn't resulted in anything so far, despite the claims of success there. So the question is, where are we going to be next week when you come back on the show? Because you just can't sit on this. He successfully, I checked again just a second ago, and the price of oil has continued to drop. So he's had a significant effect on the market today. But there's still 12 million barrels that didn't come out of the Middle East today again, and those stocks in the U.S. keep dwindling down, and so he can't just do this out. I've heard some experts suggest maybe 3 weeks is about all that we can keep the fiction going, and then the actual price of a barrel of oil and the paper price are going to start coming back into alignment, and that's going to be going higher. So where can Trump go? Because and then here's the problem, Doug. I mean, in his business mind still, if he sees this as a problem here and it's not working, then to give in to these guys and say, let's go back and hit them one more time, can only exacerbate it, because now then you're going to lose in oil infrastructure, which is just going to bake in long-term problems and probably a depression. How does he navigate that?
Well, you're talking about the physical reality versus the paper reality. And I think he prefers the paper reality. He prefers to think it will be managed, and that he can come out and make statements and persuade people of something that is not true, that it really is true. He's done that several times. And the market, as you point out, initially it responds, things get better, but then over time, what occurs? The prices start to inch up again. The sense of crisis becomes real. It's going to become more real in the future if he presses ahead, and I think he will. The other thing is this blockade is really kind of interesting, because He's imposing the blockade, and then he's blaming it all on Iran. But Iran could always make the argument, if you stop blockading us and allow us to utilize the strait and get back to business, everything will be fine. So if you're sitting in Japan or Vietnam or Thailand or Indonesia or somewhere in Europe, whom do you believe? Do you believe Trump, who's blockading it and essentially constipating an already disrupted system? Or do you believe the Iranians who say, well, if they'll stop the blockade, we'll let everybody go? I don't know. I rather suspect Iran has the advantage in that discussion.
Well, based on performance, I would certainly say so, especially our performance over the last, I don't know, since 2018, especially. Listen, in the last few minutes we have here, Doug, I wonder if you can just kind of give us what is your best interpretation or explanation, if there is such a thing, on Trump's continued focus on what's next, which is Cuba. He actually said over the past weekend that, that's coming in next, and we're going to move militarily on Cuba. I cannot come up with anything. There's no oil there. There's definitely no security threat. There's no nuclear weapons program or nuclear power program. There's none of those kinds of things. Literally, what in the hell is going on with him in Cuba?
I don't know. Perhaps he's nostalgic for the imperial past. After the Spanish-American War, we made two huge mistakes. One mistake was we stayed in the Philippines when there was no real reason for us to do so. The only thing we wanted to do was establish a coaling station in those days, a place where our ships could come in and reprovision. We ended up instead replacing the Spaniards as the imperial power. We ended up fighting a civil war there that lasted for years, killed 250,000 Filipinos pointlessly, at least that many.
Yeah.
And we annexed Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico, costs us billions and billions of dollars every year. We don't profit from it. They're not growing anything down there that makes money. They don't have any mineral wealth. Now, we stayed there presumably because, again, this would be useful to the Navy. And then for a while, we had a firing range down there. Puerto Rico should be given its independence. It's not part of our country. We'll let it go. Get out of it. This is another legacy of 19th century thinking and imperialism. I still think that the best trade we could possibly have made is to offer Denmark Puerto Rico in exchange for Greenland. We'll take Greenland. You can have Puerto Rico. I think the Danes will love it. The Danes love that nice weather down there. Next thing you know, it would be the super destination for everybody in Scandinavia and Northern Europe every year. We haven't been able to do that, but they probably could. Bottom line, this is all silly nonsense. We shouldn't be meddling in anybody else's country anymore. There's no reason to do it. People have the right to govern themselves however they like, provided they're not trying to kill us. And if they're not trying to kill us, what difference does it make to us how they govern themselves? But Indeed. That's very different from, I'm the greatest, we're the best, and everybody has to do what we say, which I guess is Trumpism, right?
Yeah, well, that's a dying animal, and I think it's going to take a lot of us down with it. But listen, we really appreciate you coming in today and give us some clarification on all this stuff. Always our great pleasure to have you on here. And just to send people to MacGregorWarrior.substack.com to keep up with Doug all during the week until we can see him back here again and find out what in the world is going on with our war next week. I'm eager to find out.
Okay, thanks very much, Dan. I appreciate it. And I think a lot of people will enjoy the most recent one that I wrote called America's Generals Need NFL Standards.
I'm very intrigued by the title myself, so
if you fail with the Dallas Cowboys, you'll have the entire population of Texas at your throat. But you go overseas and you botch Afghanistan, botch Iraq, botch anything else, everybody in Texas isn't interested. They'll just go